The Mitchell Estates' annual summer party was in full swing. Crystal champagne flutes sparkled in the afternoon sun as Silicon Valley's elite mingled around the pool. I sat quietly in my garden chair, separated from the important guests on the main terrace. I checked my phone discreetly. Message from my COO, jet approaching. ETA 25 minutes. Contracts signed. Emma, Mom's voice carried across the lawn. The garden really is where you belong. With the other disappointments. I slipped my phone away. Hello, Mom. My brother James raised his champagne from the terrace. The lawn is for failure, sis. Though I'm sure your little software company is cute. If only they knew about the technological empire I'd built while they weren't watching. Not everyone can run a successful tech company, Dad added, greeting another venture capitalist. Some people just lack vision. I checked my watch. 20 minutes. Speaking of success, James straightened his designer blazer. Dad, should we tell everyone our news? Dad beamed. Yes. Mitchell Tech is going public next month. James secured major backing from Valley Partners. That's wonderful, I said quietly, checking my phone again. 15 minutes. See. Mom gestured toward James. That's real success. Not whatever small-time coding you're doing. The lawn is for failures, she announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. The terrace is for achievers. 10 minutes. Emma could still join Mitchell Tech, Dad offered. Maybe in quality assurance. I'm happy with my work, I said. Happy? James scoffed. Happiness doesn't build billion-dollar companies, sis. Real work does. 5 minutes. A distant sound caught everyone's attention. The distinctive whine of jet engines approaching. That's odd, Dad frowned. The airport's restricted airspace today for our party. I stood from my garden chair, smoothing my simple dress. Actually, Dad, that's my arrival. You're what? Mom's voice rose. The sleek private jet appeared over the trees, my company's logo clearly visible on its tail. It touched down perfectly on the estate's private airstrip. That's impossible, James whispered. The Genesis logo, one of Dad's business partners pointed. But that's the most valuable private tech company in the world? I smiled. Yes, it is. Dad's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. You work for Genesis? No, I corrected. I founded it. I am Genesis. The party went silent. All eyes moved from the jet to the woman they'd banished to the garden. But you're just coding small projects, Mom stammered. Actually, I checked my phone one last time. I just closed a $12 billion acquisition. That's why I was late. Board meeting in Tokyo. James collapsed into a nearby chair. Genesis, you're the mysterious CEO nobody's ever seen? The same CEO who just bought controlling interest in Mitchell Tech, I added casually. Those Valley Partners backing your IPO? They work for me. Dad's business partners started whispering, phones appearing in manicured hands as they frantically Googled Genesis's latest news. My phone buzzed. Message from my team. Press release ready. Time to show them everything. I looked at their shocked faces. Mom's disdain replaced by disbelief, James's arrogance shattered, Dad's confidence crumbling, and typed back. Yes. Show them what real vision looks like. The Mitchell Estates' pristine lawn had become a stage for the ultimate power shift. The jet's engines wound down as my executive team emerged, their confident strides a stark contrast to the stunned party guests frozen with their champagne flutes. Let me explain what happens now, I said, standing from my garden chair one last time. Mitchell Tech's IPO isn't happening next month. At least not the way you planned. What do you mean? James's voice cracked. Genesis isn't just buying controlling interest. I pulled up documents on my tablet. We're absorbing Mitchell Tech completely. Your revolutionary software? It's 5 years behind what we developed. Dad found his voice. That's ridiculous. Our tech is cutting edge. Your tech, I interrupted, is obsolete. While you were hosting garden parties, Genesis was redefining the entire industry. The party guest had gravitated toward our confrontation, phones recording every moment. But your little coding projects. Mom whispered. Were cover stories, I smiled. Did you really think the CEO of Genesis worked on small-time coding? Everything you mocked was carefully crafted misdirection. My executive team approached, tablets ready. Ms. Mitchell, the contracts are final. Mitchell Tech is now officially a Genesis subsidiary. James jumped up. Wait. I'm the CEO of Mitchell Tech. We're the CEO, I corrected. As of 3 minutes ago, you're nothing. Unless what? He demanded. Unless you can prove your worth to Genesis. Not as Dad's son but as a genuine innovator. Can you? Mom stepped forward. Now see here, young lady. No, Mom, you see here. I turned my tablet to show Genesis's global reach. While you were deciding who deserved terrace seating, I built this. A technology empire that makes Mitchell Tech look like a high school project. Dad's business partners were already gravitating toward my executives, sensing where the real power lay. This is impossible, Dad muttered. The valuations, the technology. Genesis is valued at $180 billion, I stated flatly. Mitchell Tech? A mere $400 million. And that's being generous. My phone buzzed. Message from my CFO. Markets reacting to acquisition. Genesis stock up 12% in after-hours trading. You know what's ironic? I continued, watching their faces. Every time you put me in the garden, I was on video calls with global tech leaders. Every small project you mocked was worth billions. The garden is for failures, Mom repeated weakly. No, Mom. The garden was for watching you underestimate me. And now. The estate's smart screens suddenly lit up with breaking news. Tech world shocked as Genesis acquires Mitchell Tech. Mysterious Genesis revealed as Mitchell heiress. Silicon Valley's biggest secret uncovered. Your options are limited, I addressed my family. Dad, Mitchell Tech becomes a Genesis research division. You can stay as an advisor if you can handle reporting to your garden failure. He slumped, 30 years of tech industry confidence evaporating. James, I turned to my brother, you have two choices. Prove your actual technical skills and earn a real position, or take a generous exit package. And if I stay, he asked quietly, then you learn what real innovation means. Starting from the bottom, no shortcuts. Mom's hands trembled around her champagne glass. Emma, please, we can discuss this. Like you discuss my future? My worth? My place at parties. The silence was deafening. My executive team moved forward with more tablets. The press conference starts in 30 minutes, Ms. Mitchell. Global media is waiting. Perfect timing, I smiled. Dad, James, you'll need to decide quickly. The announcement goes live with or without you. You're destroying everything we built, Dad protested. No, I corrected. I'm saving Mitchell Tech from irrelevance. You should thank me. Another year of your outdated tech and you'd be bankrupt. The party guests were openly staring now, phones recording Silicon Valley's most dramatic power shift in decades. How long? James asked. How long have you been Genesis's CEO? Since I founded it 6 years ago. Right after you told me my coding ideas were cute little projects. My phone lit up with another message. Global tech media arriving. Ready to reveal phase 2. I looked at their shattered expressions. The family that had exiled me to the garden now standing in the shadow of my jet. The press conference will explain everything. I gathered my things. You have 20 minutes to decide. Join the future I'm building or stay in your comfortable past. And Mom, I added, turning back. The garden isn't for failures. It's for people who see beyond the terrace to something bigger. As my executive team led me toward the jet, I heard the whispers, saw the phones recording, felt the power shifting like tectonic plates beneath Silicon Valley. The sun was setting over the Mitchell estate, casting long shadows across the lawn where I'd been exiled countless times. My executive team had set up a temporary command center in what used to be the pool house, screens showing Genesis's global operations. Ms. Mitchell, my chief strategy officer, approached. The media's asking about Mitchell Tech's current projects. Show them, I nodded. The screens filled with comparison data. Genesis's advanced AI systems next to Mitchell Tech's outdated algorithms. Dad stepped into the pool house, his confidence replaced by uncertainty. Those are our proprietary systems. Were your systems, I corrected. Genesis reverse engineered them last year. Took our junior team about a week to show all the flaws. James followed, clutching his laptop. But our neural network is 3 generations behind. I pulled up more data. See these pattern recognition rates. Mitchell Tech's best AI is slower than Genesis's prototype from 4 years ago. Mom hovered in the doorway watching her tech dynasty crumble. Your development team, I continued, has been stuck in old paradigms. While you were celebrating incremental improvements, Genesis was redefining what's possible. The screens showed live feeds from Genesis Labs worldwide, quantum computing, advanced AI, technologies that made Mitchell Tech look like ancient history. All this time, Dad whispered, when you said you were working on small projects. I was leading global innovation teams, I finished. Those late-night coding sessions you mocked? I was revolutionizing technology while you were planning garden parties. My phone buzzed again. Message from Tokyo. Asian markets opening. Genesis stock soaring on acquisition news. Here's what happens tomorrow, I addressed them. Mitchell Tech's board meets at 9 a.m. They'll approve the Genesis acquisition because they know it's their only chance at survival. And us? James asked quietly. You said the garden was for failures, I smiled. Consider this your chance to prove you belong on the terrace. If you can earn it. The screens switched to live feeds of global news coverage. Genesis emerges from shadows. Mitchell Tech acquired. Family drama rocks Silicon Valley. Garden TO greatness. Tech's new queen. Your positions at Mitchell Tech are gone, I stated flatly. But Genesis always needs talented people, if they're willing to learn humility first. Humility. Mom found her voice. We built a tech empire. No, Mom. You built a tech company. I built an empire. There's a difference. My executive team moved with practiced precision, preparing for the press conference. Each screen showed another aspect of Genesis's dominance. Market share, technological breakthroughs, global influence. Tomorrow morning, I continued, Mitchell Tech's employees learn they work for Genesis. Your choice is simple, help them adapt or step aside. Dad stepped forward. Emma, please. We can work together. Like you worked with me? I raised an eyebrow. How many times did you dismiss my ideas? How many garden chairs did you give me? The silence was heavy with regret. My phone lit up, press conference stage ready. Global broadcast in 15 minutes. You have until the press conference to decide. I gathered my materials. Join Genesis as regular employees, learning and earning your positions, or watch from the garden as we absorb everything you built. Regular employees? James looked stricken. But I'm CEO. Wasu, I corrected. Now you're nothing, unless you can prove your worth without Dad's name backing you. The estate's grounds had transformed into a media circus. News vans lined the driveway, reporters positioned their cameras, all waiting to see the Genesis CEO emerge from the shadows. One last thing, I turned back to them. That garden chair? I'm having it bronzed and installed in Genesis's lobby. A reminder that success doesn't come from where you sit. It comes from what you build while others aren't watching. Mom stepped forward. Emma, we're still family. Are we? I challenged. Or are we just people who share a last name and a garden where you put your disappointments? The screens showed Mitchell Tech's stock price plummeting as Genesis soared. The market had already decided which Mitchell vision would survive. 10 minutes to press conference, my assistant announced. I looked at my family one last time. The father who dismissed my ideas, the brother who mocked my work, the mother who exiled me to the garden. Time to decide, I said simply. The future waits for no one, not even the Mitchells. The next morning's headlines were everywhere. From garden chair to tech throne, Genesis CEO's revenge. Every tech blog and business channel buzzed with the story of how the Mitchell family's failure had built the world's most valuable private tech company while they banished her to the lawn. I sat in Genesis's real headquarters, a stunning glass tower that made Mitchell Tech's offices look like a startup garage. The wall of smart glass displayed our global operations while my small coding projects reshaped the tech world. Ms. Mitchell, my assistant called. Your family's here. All of them. I watched through the smart glass as they entered the building's lobby, their usual confidence replaced by nervous awe. Send them up. They emerged from the private elevator, eyes wide at the reality of what I'd built. Gone were Mom's dismissive smirks, Dad's condescending confidence, James's arrogant swagger. Please sit. I gestured to the visitor area. I assume you've seen the morning coverage? Everyone has, James whispered. TechCrunch wired Wall Street Journal. The garden chair billionaire. Tech's greatest secret. Not so secret anymore, I noted. Though you had 6 years to discover it yourselves. Mom touched one of the smart glass panels tentatively. This is incredible. More incredible than my small-time coding? Dad cleared his throat. We spent all night reviewing Genesis's patents. The quantum computing breakthroughs, the AI innovations. Now you review them? I raised an eyebrow. Not when I tried explaining them at every family gathering. We should have listened, Mom said quietly. Should have. I stood, walking to the windows overlooking Silicon Valley. Like when I tried showing you our neural network prototype and you told me to stop playing with computers? James stepped forward. About my position at Mitchell Tech. Your former position, I corrected, pulling up performance data. Our analysis shows your division has underperformed for 3 years. Care to explain? He paled. I followed industry standards. Standard. I laughed. Genesis doesn't do standard. We set standards. That's why we're worth $180 billion while Mitchell Tech stagnated at $400 million. The screens showed Genesis's global impact, technologies transforming industries, innovations reshaping the future. Emma, Dad tried again, we were blind. So focused on traditional success. That you missed real innovation, I finished. Do you know why I kept the garden chair appearances? Why I played along with your dismissals? They shook their heads. Because it showed me exactly who people really were. Those who saw beyond appearances found Genesis. The rest. I gestured to them, stayed in their comfortable bubbles. Mom smoothed her designer dress nervously. We can change. Learn to see differently. Can you? I challenged. Can Silicon Valley's premier tech family accept that real innovation doesn't come from garden parties and status? The screens filled with more headlines. Genesis revolutionizes tech landscape. Mitchell Tech absorbed into Genesis empire. Family dynamics upended by daughter's billions. You have choices, I said finally. Dad, your development teams need complete retraining. James, you can start as a junior developer. If you can handle actually coding instead of just managing. They exchanged glances, understanding their new reality. What do you want from us? James asked softly. Want? I smiled. I want you to understand that while you were planning garden parties, I was planning technological revolutions. While you were deciding who deserved terrace seating, I was deciding the future of technology. Dad stepped forward. Please give us a chance to what? Finally see me? Or just see my success? Both, Mom said quietly. We were wrong. So terribly wrong. I turned back to the city view, my city now in many ways. You know what the real difference is between us? You saw tech as a family business. I saw it as a way to change the world. My phone lit up with another message. Quantum computing breakthrough ready. Time to announce phase 3. Here's what happens now. I faced them again. You'll learn our systems from the ground up. No shortcuts, no family privileges. Prove you can innovate without the Mitchell name carrying you. And if we accept? Dad asked. Then show me the great Mitchell Tech team can adapt to real innovation. Prove you can move beyond garden parties to actual technological advancement. They nodded, their carefully curated tech world transformed by the daughter they dismissed. The next press conference starts in an hour. I checked my phone. I'm announcing Genesis's quantum computing breakthrough. You're welcome to attend, from the general seating section. As they turned to leave, Mom paused. The garden chair is being installed in our lobby today, I finished. A reminder that true success grows even in hostile soil. After they left, I turned back to the screens showing Genesis's worldwide impact. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding, it's succeeding so monumentally that even those who exiled you have to look up to see how far you've risen. And in tech, true power comes not from where you sit, but from what you build while others aren't watching. As I prepared for the press conference, I smiled, knowing that every future garden party would be haunted by the memory of the daughter who turned her exile into an empire. That was better than any terrace seat.
The rooftop ballroom glittered with chandeliers and glass walls opening onto the Denver skyline. Snow still capped the Rockies in the distance, a reminder of how close wilderness stood to the city. Inside, every detail had been staged to celebrate Gareth's 35th birthday string quartet. Trays of hors d'oeuvres, a private chef carving prime rib under golden light. I had contributed more than $1,000 to make it happen vintage wine from a Napa vineyard, and part of the chef's fee. No one said a word of thanks. My parents floated past me as if I were a guest in someone else's family. Their attention stayed locked on Gareth, who stood in the center of the room shaking hands and soaking in compliments like they were oxygen. Such charm, such ease. My mother gushed to Aunt Lillian. He's always had a gift with people. The fact that my brother hadn't held a job in years didn't seem to matter. I kept near the bar, my glass of wine balanced in hand, when I caught whispers at the next table. "Celine works herself to death," one cousin muttered. "All that tech nonsense. But what's it for? She's still alone." Another voice laughed softly. "Career over family, she'll regret it." I stared into my glass, willing myself not to react. It wasn't new. The message had been clear since childhood. Gareth the star, Celine the shadow. Tonight, the contrast was sharper than ever. I breathed deep, ready to endure another evening of being invisible, not yet knowing that the moment waiting ahead would demand far more than quiet tolerance. The room shifted when my father stepped onto the small stage near the quartet. He raised his glass, then tapped the microphone, his voice carrying with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. "Tonight we honor Gareth, my brilliant son, on his 35th birthday. And we have an announcement to make." The quartet stopped mid-note. Conversations faded into silence. I set down my glass, sensing something off. Though I couldn't name it yet, my father smiled wide, his arm draped around Gareth. "Our generous daughter, Celine, has decided to gift her penthouse near Union Station to her brother. A fresh start for him, a symbol of family unity." The words hit like a blow. My breath stalled. My home, the place I had fought for through years of late nights, contracts, and risk had just been handed away like it was nothing more than a party favor. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling. Some guests clapped automatically. Others murmured approval as if the decision were already carved in stone. I stood frozen, a heat rising up my chest, humiliation pressing against my ribs. Gareth's fiancée leaned into him, eyes glimmering with triumph. I looked to my mother. She nodded at me as though coaxing a child to behave, her lips curving into a smile that was more command than comfort. "It's only fair," she whispered to the nearest guest, loud enough for me to hear. The noise grew suffocating. I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting for my compliance, expecting my smile, my gracious nod. My hand trembled against the stem of my glass, but my voice came steady when I spoke. No, the word cut through the air, sharper than any note the quartet could have played. The applause faltered. Conversations stuttered into silence. My father's smile dropped, replaced with a look I knew too well, disbelief sharpening into rage. I straightened, meeting his gaze. "I worked for that home. It's mine. I won't give it away." The ballroom seemed to tilt, and I knew in that instant the night was no longer about Gareth's birthday. It was about me, and the line I had just drawn. For a moment, the silence held. Then Gareth's chair scraped back hard against the floor. He stormed toward me, his face flushed, the charm he wore like a mask stripped away. "You ungrateful!" His words broke off as his hand swung. The crack echoed through the ballroom, sharp and final. Pain seared across my cheek, forcing my head to the side. I staggered but did not fall. Gasps erupted. Someone shouted my name. A dozen phones lifted at once, red recording dots glowing. My pearl earring spun across the marble floor, skittering until it stopped beneath a table leg. The room seemed to shrink, every detail etched in impossible clarity, the chandelier's reflection in the glass. The murmur of guests already whispering, the red blotch I felt blooming on my skin. I touched my cheek lightly, steadying my breath. Gareth stood over me, chest heaving, waiting for me to break. But I would not give him that. Slowly, I bent down, picked up the earring, and closed my fingers around its smooth surface. I looked at him, my brother, the golden child whose failures were forever excused, and offered the faintest smile. Happy birthday, brother. The words landed heavier than any shout could have. His eyes flickered, confusion breaking through the fury. I turned before he could respond. The crowd parted as I walked, whispers chasing me like shadows. Phones followed my steps, capturing every angle of my exit. Behind me, the party had collapsed into chaos, but I no longer belonged to it. The heavy doors closed as I stepped into the hallway, the air cooler, quieter, but no less charged. My hand tightened around the earring, and I knew I needed to call someone who would understand. The hallway was hushed, the sound of music and chatter muffled behind the heavy doors. My cheek still burned where Gareth's hand had landed, but the sharper pain was deeper, the realization that no one in that room had stepped between us. Not my mother, not my father, not even a guest who dared to question what had just happened. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling. My thumb hovered over Maris's name. She answered on the first ring. Celine. What's wrong? The words spilled out before I could stop them. The announcement, the slap, the silence afterward. Her anger cracked through the line. They humiliated you in front of everyone, and he hit you, Celine. This can't stand. Call Eleanor. The name stilled me. Eleanor Whitcomb, my grandmother, 80 years old, still sharp as steel. The woman who had outlived 2 recessions, a failed real estate market, and half the city's scandals. She had always been distant but never blind. The Harwood reputation still moved at her command. Maris, she'll think I'm dragging her into drama, I whispered. Drama. He struck you. That's assault, and your parents sat there like statues. Eleanor's the only one they still fear. Call her. I stared at the glowing contacts list, my pulse racing. For years I had avoided leaning on her, convinced I had to prove I could stand on my own. But tonight, independence had left me alone in a hallway, holding an earring like it was a shield. My thumb slid to her name, Eleanor Whitcomb. The line of power that cut through generations, that had funded family businesses, that had shaped Denver society. I pressed call. The ring sounded once, twice. My chest tightened, waiting for the voice that could turn this night on its head. The call had ended with only 4 words. I'm coming. Celine. No scolding, no hesitation. Just that promise. I stood in the hallway, pulse unsteady, until the distant hum of voices inside the ballroom swelled again. 30 minutes later, the doors opened, and the shift in the air was immediate. Eleanor Whitcomb did not walk, she commanded. Her silver cane struck the marble floor with each step, the sound echoing louder than the quartet had played all night. Conversations died mid-sentence. The crowd parted as though she carried the weight of judgment itself. At 80, my grandmother still wore authority like a second skin, her gaze sharper than glass. She didn't look at me first, her eyes locked on my father. Daniel, she said, her voice low but cutting through the silence. Explain why you dared to lay a hand on my granddaughter. My father faltered, the microphone still clutched in his hand. His face drained of color, the polished veneer of host slipping away. My mother clutched his arm, her lips pressed tight, searching for a defense that would not come. Eleanor lifted her cane and pointed toward the floor. You have 5 minutes, she said. her tone flat as stone. "Find the earring she lost when you struck her. If it is not in my hand, I will handle this myself." The guests shifted uneasily, exchanging glances, as though uncertain if this was theater or a reckoning. Gareth bent down quickly, his designer jacket brushing the floor as he scrambled near the tables. His fiancée knelt beside him, her face pale. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had whispered about me minutes before now dropped to their knees, searching under chairs, pushing aside napkins and wine glasses. I stayed near the doorway, the cool pearl hidden safely in my palm. The room that had once cheered my brother now buzzed with frantic energy. The weight of Eleanor's authority pressing down on every back bowed to the floor. My grandmother's eyes swept across the scene, unmoved, unblinking, waiting for the truth she already knew. The minutes ticked by, the search dragging on with no result. I kept my hand closed around the earring, its weight reminding me that Eleanor's demand was never about jewelry. It was about exposing them all. At last, she struck her cane against the marble, the sound like a gavel. Everyone froze, heads turning toward her. "Enough," she said. Her eyes narrowed on my father first. "Daniel, you run a company, yet you cannot govern your own temper. You raised your hand against my granddaughter as though her dignity were yours to spend?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. Her gaze shifted to my mother. "Susan, you have coddled Gareth into uselessness and stood silent while cruelty became tradition. Your silence speaks louder than his slap." My mother's face tightened, but she said nothing. Then Eleanor's cane swung toward Gareth, still crouched near the floor. "And you, 35 years old, no work, no honor, and yet you believe you are owed her home? You have taken enough from your sister." The silence pressed hard against the glass walls, broken only by the sound of phones recording, cameras flashing. Eleanor straightened, shoulders squared. "Let it be known tonight, before these witnesses, that I will rewrite my will. Everything I own, my estate, my investments, my properties will pass to Celine. Not to you, Daniel. Not to you, Susan. And not to you, Gareth. She alone has proven she can build and protect what is hers." The room erupted, gasps, shouts, relatives talking over one another. Aunts argued with uncles. Cousins protested, voices climbing into chaos. Guests raised their phones higher, capturing every second, their screens glowing red. I stood still, my grandmother's declaration surrounding me like a shield. For the first time that night, I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt seen. Eleanor met my eyes across the ballroom, her small nod carrying more weight than all their noise. And as the crowd fractured into anger and disbelief, I understood that the consequences of her words would not end here. By morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Notifications stacked faster than I could clear them, each one a reminder that last night's humiliation had escaped the ballroom. Someone's live stream had gone viral first on Instagram, then Twitter, then local Denver news. Clips of Gareth's slap, the gasp from the guests, and Eleanor's steel-edged words spread like wildfire. Headlines poured in millionaire airstrikes sister over penthouse dispute. Comment sections filled with outrage. Strangers dissected every second of the footage, replaying the crack of his hand, slowing down the moment my earring flew. Disgusting. She deserves better. Imagine hitting your own sister because she wouldn't hand over her home. By noon, Denver's Channel 7 aired a segment. They replayed Eleanor's declaration on loop. "I will rewrite my will. Everything I own will pass to Celine." The anchor's tone was half shock, half admiration. The fallout was immediate. Gareth's fiancée posted a cryptic message on Facebook about reconsidering commitments built on lies. Within days, the engagement was officially over. My father's business partners began pulling out of contracts, citing reputational concerns. My mother's social circle, Once the envy of Cherry Creek luncheons shrank overnight. Invitations stopped. Friends avoided her at the grocery store. I sat on my couch, phone in hand. The Denver skyline spread wide through the glass behind me. Vindication should have felt sweet, but instead it was heavy, almost suffocating. The world finally saw what I had endured. But it wasn't triumph that filled me. It was exhaustion. Years of swallowing their dismissals, their favoritism. Their silence had crystallized into one public reckoning. The comments kept pouring in, some supportive, others curious, a few invasive. I turned the screen face down on the coffee table and closed my eyes. Justice had arrived, but it carried its own weight, and I knew it wasn't the end, not while my parents still believed they could reach me. 2 nights later, the doorbell rang just past dusk. I almost didn't answer, but the shadowed figures behind the frosted glass left no doubt. My parents stood on my doorstep, their postures deflated, nothing like the poised hosts of Gareth's party. When I opened the door, my father spoke first, his voice low. "Celine, we need to talk." My mother stepped forward quickly, eyes red-rimmed, her tone pleading. "We made a mistake. The pressure to keep Gareth afloat, it got out of hand. We lost ourselves." I stayed in the doorway, arms crossed, heart tight. "You didn't lose yourselves," I said. "You chose. You demanded my home," then stood by when he struck me in front of 30 people. My father flinched as if the words themselves were blows. He tried again, softer this time. "You know how much appearances matter in this city. We thought you thought I was expendable." I cut in, that my work, my sacrifices, my independence could be repackaged as a gift for Gareth. And when I refused, you let him raise his hand against me without lifting your own to stop it. My mother's hand reached out, trembling. "We're still a family." "Celine, can't we start again?" I stepped back, shaking my head. Family doesn't ask for obedience at the cost of dignity. Family doesn't trade loyalty for silence. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the city beyond my balcony windows. Their faces drawn, desperate, blurred into the years of being unseen, unheard, unloved unless I complied. I placed my hand on the door. This is where I end it. Their silhouettes lingered as the door closed, the final click echoing through my chest. I leaned against the wood, heart pounding, but the weight that had anchored me for years began to lift, making room for something new. Weeks passed, and the noise of scandal slowly shifted from a roar to a background hum. Headlines faded, comment threads quieted, but the silence from my parents and Gareth remained. No calls, no letters, no last attempts to force a reconciliation. Their absence was louder than their words had ever been. In the same stretch of time, my world began to rebuild. At the Denver Tech Summit, I stood on stage as the new chief technology officer of our firm, a glass award in my hands catching the light. Applause rose from colleagues and strangers alike, their faces open with pride rather than expectation. For the first time, recognition came without conditions. Afterward, I joined Maris and Eleanor at a small celebration downtown. Maris raised her glass, her grin wide. To Celine, who showed us that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you choose who to open for. Eleanor sat beside me, her cane leaning against the table, her eyes fierce and steady. "I told you," she said softly, "you carry more strength than the rest of them combined. Don't ever forget it." The warmth in that moment was something I hadn't felt in years. Laughter filled the table, not forced, not polished, but honest. Around me, people stayed not because of obligation, but because they wanted to. Back home later that night, the penthouse felt different. The same glass walls, the same skyline spread over the city, but no longer a fortress I had to defend. It had become a place where I could welcome those who chose me, not demand from me. And as I turned off the lights, the silence waiting beyond my family's absence no longer felt like loss. It felt like freedom, guiding me toward what still lay ahead. 3 months later, the city stretched out before me in a wash of lights. From my balcony, the cranes near Union Station glimmered against the Denver skyline, each one a reminder of how quickly the world could change. The penthouse beneath my feet had once felt fragile, a prize others tried to claim. Now it was steady, mine in every sense. The legal papers had arrived a week earlier, Eleanor's signature bold across every page. Her estate properties, investments, holdings had been secured in my name. When I thanked her, she only waved a hand and said, "I'm giving it to the only one who won't waste it." Inside, the rooms were quiet, but not empty. Maris visited often, filling the kitchen with chatter and the living room with laughter. My colleagues came by after late nights at the office, bringing takeout cartons and stories. Eleanor's cane still tapped through my hallways when she came for tea, her presence grounding me more than any contract ever could. The silence from my parents and Gareth had become permanent, but I no longer measured myself against it. I had stopped looking for a door back into their approval. This place, this life, was no longer about surviving them. It was about choosing the people who respected me enough to stand beside me, leaning against the balcony rail. I felt the night air cool against my skin. The battles were behind me, but the lesson remained true. Family are not those who demand your keys, but those who guard your dignity. When dignity locks one door and opens another, which future will you step into first? The house smelled of sage and roasted turkey, the kind of warmth that should have promised comfort. I was moving down the hallway toward the guest room when I noticed the study door left slightly open. My father's voice carried through the crack, low but firm. "Your sister. She isn't worth a penny she's done." For a second, I thought I had misheard. Then Nathan's soft reply followed, uncertain, almost apologetic. I stood frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. From my angle, I could just glimpse the curve of my mother's shoulder as she hovered by the window. Richard shuffled papers at his desk. Nathan sat slouched on the sofa, but it was Sylvia who turned her head first. Her eyes met mine across the narrow opening. Instead of shock or shame, she offered the smallest smile, as if she had been waiting for me to hear. The smile hollowed me out more than the words themselves. It told me everything I had feared but never wanted to believe, that my place in this family had been quietly revised, my value appraised and dismissed, all without my voice in the room. I stepped back into the shadows, every memory of overlooked trophies and deferred praise colliding into one sharp truth. The house felt colder despite the fire burning in the hearth, each portrait on the wall reminding me whose face had always mattered more. By the time I reached the guest room, my hands trembled so violently I could barely close the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bland floral comforter, the sounds of laughter from downstairs drifting upward, as if nothing had broken. But something had, and I knew I would not sleep that night. Sleep refused me, and instead my mind wandered backward through the years, tallying a ledger of childhood moments that now made terrible sense. Nathan was always the one under the lights. When he made the debate finals his junior year, my parents flew across the country without hesitation. That same week, I had qualified for the state math championship. I went alone with my teacher, my parents sending me off with a polite smile and a reminder that Nathan needed their support more. "You'll be fine," my mother always said, her tone gentle but dismissive, as if independence had been my natural state rather than a condition imposed by neglect. I learned early that recognition was a resource allocated sparingly and rarely to me. There was one exception, my grandmother Helen. She lived in a small craftsman bungalow across town, a house that smelled of lavender and old books. On weekends, she would spread bank statements across her kitchen table and walk me through the mysteries of compound interest and savings bonds. "Financial independence is freedom," she said more than once, her voice steady, her eyes sharper than anyone gave her credit for. While Nathan complained those visits were boring and often stayed home, I absorbed every word. When she passed away during my senior year, she left me $15,000, specifically earmarked for education. At the reading of the will, I caught the quick glance my parents exchanged, something brittle in their expressions. Later, my mother remarked, almost casually, "Your grandmother always favored you," turning what had been a gift into a wedge. That inheritance became my ticket out, though even then it was reframed as imbalance. Nathan received tuition, housing, and endless allowances. I stretched Helen's gift across scholarships and part-time jobs, learning to live within margins so tight they cut. Lying awake in the guest room now, I realized Helen had done more than give me money. She had handed me tools my parents never intended me to have the knowledge to stand alone. As I pressed my palms against the quilt, I knew those lessons were about to become my only defense, because the account I had once called family had just declared me insolvent. Northwestern was the first place I felt both invisible and free at the same time. Invisible because no one there cared about the Albright family name. Free because for once I could define myself by numbers on a ledger rather than a role assigned at the dinner table. Helen's inheritance covered my first year's tuition and books. After that, I pieced it together: scholarships, work study in the library, tutoring calculus on weekends. I grew accustomed to counting every dollar twice, not out of fear, but out of pride. Back home, Nathan had chosen USC. My parents paid the bill in full, justifying the expense with words I could still hear. He needs the right environment to succeed. His right environment was an apartment near the beach and a new car in the driveway. Mine was a dorm with peeling paint, shifts at the dining hall, and textbooks bought used and resold for cash. After graduation, I moved east to Chicago, taking a position with a financial consulting firm. My apartment in Lincoln Park was barely 700 square feet, but it was mine. Each piece of furniture I bought secondhand and refinished felt like a declaration I build my life brick by brick. My emergency fund grew slowly, then steadily. Retirement contributions followed, and eventually a portfolio that outpaced even some of my older colleagues. But discipline did not erase obligation. Every month, without fail, I wired $500 back to Portland. It had begun years earlier, during what my father called a temporary slowdown in the construction business. I told myself it was my contribution, proof I still belonged to the family unit despite the distance. Even after the company recovered, the transfers continued, unquestioned. I thought of it as duty then, as though my independence had to be subsidized by a tether. Tonight, sitting in the guest room with my parents' voices still echoing through me, I saw it differently. The money I had sent all those years was more than obligation. It was fuel for a machine that now claimed I was worth nothing at all. Thanksgiving dinner was meant to be a celebration, but in my family, it always felt more like a stage. The table glowed with crystal glasses and silver polished to perfection, every detail curated by my mother. I had rehearsed how I would tell them how Michael had asked me to marry him, how the ring was exactly what I wanted, simple and chosen with care. I waited for the right moment. But before I could finish the sentence, Nathan cleared his throat and launched into a description of his latest startup idea. My father leaned forward immediately, eyes alight, peppering him with questions about market growth and venture capital. My mother placed her hand over Nathan's and smiled proudly, as though the meal itself had been prepared in honor of his vision. When I tried again, gently mentioning my engagement, the words fell flat. Sylvia glanced at me briefly, her lips curling into that faint smile I had come to know too well. It was the smile that told me she heard me, and also that she had already decided the subject was unworthy of attention. The conversation shifted back to Nathan, and my news vanished like a dropped fork beneath the table. Hours later, while the house settled into its late-night quiet, I walked past the study. The door stood ajar again. Richard's voice was firm, certain. The business, the house, the trust, all of it will go to Nathan. It's already structured. She doesn't need any of it. I held my breath. my heart hammering against the wall of my chest. Through the narrow opening, I saw Nathan nod, uneasy but silent. My mother stood at the window, her reflection caught in the glass. She turned, saw me there, and met my eyes without surprise. And then she smiled the same knowing smile that had silenced me at dinner before turning back as though my exclusion had always been part of the plan. I slipped back into the hallway, the echo of her smile burning hotter than my father's words, already knowing I could not let the night end without opening every ledger they had tried to keep hidden. The house was dark except for the dim light in the guest room where I sat with my laptop balanced on my knees. I should have been sleeping, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's smile, that quiet confirmation of my erasure. Instead of rest, I opened the folders I had carried across the country, the meticulous records I always kept bank transfers, account summaries, scanned receipts. At first, I told myself I was only reviewing them to distract my mind, but as the hours passed, the story of my life began to unfold in numbers that spoke louder than any holiday toast. Line after line showed the monthly transfers, $500 without fail, stretching back nearly 7 years. $42,000, wired faithfully to a family account I now knew had nothing to do with temporary slowdowns. I scrolled further and froze when I saw another entry, $8,000, pulled directly from the inheritance Helen had left me. The account had been drained 3 years earlier, disguised as a family investment. I traced it to Nathan's app launch, the one that fizzled before the ink was dry on his glossy business cards. No one had asked me. No one had repaid me. Then came the greater violation. I found loan documents linked to my father's construction company, the guarantor section bearing my name, my credit history, my stability, leveraged without my knowledge. I remembered signing a stack of insurance forms one Christmas visit, not realizing what had been slipped inside. The realization chilled me more than the November air seeping through the window. I began typing, page after page. I cataloged not just the money, but the moments the championship I attended alone, the scholarships I fought for, the dinners where Nathan's sketches or ideas eclipsed my every accomplishment. 7 pages in total, a record of a lifetime's imbalance. It wasn't for them. It was for me, proof that I hadn't imagined it, evidence that could withstand the denials I knew were coming. By the time the first light pressed against the blinds, my hands ached from typing, but my mind was clear. I had tallied the ledger, and the balance was final. The only task left was to place it before them. By the time dawn lifted over the hills, I had already brewed a full pot of coffee. The ritual steadied me, measured scoops, the hum of the machine, the sharp scent filling the quiet kitchen. I set 4 mugs on the dining table, one for each of us, and laid the folders beside them like place cards at a banquet no one had wanted. Richard was the first to appear, drawn by the smell. His eyes flicked from the mugs to my face, then to the neat stack of papers. He knew it was no ordinary breakfast. Without waiting for him to speak, I gestured to his seat. Sit down. There are things we need to discuss. Sylvia entered moments later, still immaculate in her morning clothes, a faint trace of perfume trailing her. Nathan stumbled in last, hair mussed, rubbing sleep from his eyes. They took their places, puzzled but wary. I slid a folder toward each of them. Inside is a complete record of every dollar I've contributed to this family since leaving for Chicago. $42,000 in transfers, $8,000 stolen from the inheritance Grandma Helen left me, and fraudulent loan documents signed in my name. Read them. Richard flipped a page, his jaw tightening. This is unnecessary, he said. Business is complicated. Families help one another. Help doesn't involve forgery. I answered. My voice was steady, calm, the tone I used in boardrooms. Sylvia reached for her mug, fingers trembling slightly. Corinne, darling, you're overreacting. We've always supported you in our way. Think of everything we've done, your education, your opportunities. My education was paid for with scholarships and jobs. My opportunities. I carved myself. What you've done is siphon my resources while telling me I didn't matter. Nathan sat silent, staring at the papers, lips parted but no words coming. I let the weight of the evidence press into the silence. Finally, I pushed my chair back and stood. I'm done. No more transfers. No more guarantees. I will not underwrite this family while being erased from it. The room seemed to contract, the polished table suddenly too small to contain us. Richard's eyes narrowed, Sylvia's face paled, Nathan's fingers tightened around the folder. I left the words there, final, already preparing for what would come next. Nathan was the first to break the silence, his voice rough with disbelief. Corinne, you've misunderstood. Dad never meant you weren't included. These things are complicated. You're making it sound worse than it is. I met his eyes across the table. Did I misunderstand working nights at the library while you were given a car at 16? Did I misunderstand paying my own way through Northwestern while Mom and Dad covered every dollar of your tuition at USC? Did I misunderstand sending $500 a month from my salary while you lived rent-free in an apartment they furnished for you? Color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed again. No words arriving quickly enough to blunt the truth. I leaned forward. The app launch you bragged about, the one that failed within months, do you know where part of the funding came from? His brows knit, uncertainty flickering. Dad said $8,000. I cut in. From Grandma Helen's inheritance. Money left to me for education. It went into your project without my knowledge, and without a single word of repayment. The paper in his hands trembled as he scanned the lines of my documentation. For the first time, he looked less like the favored son and more like someone who had been kept in a carefully curated illusion. He turned to our parents, his voice rising. Is this true? You took her money to cover my business. You've been using her transfers all these years, Sylvia started to answer, smoothing her tone into reason. But Richard's sharp glance silenced her. The look only confirmed what Nathan already suspected. His shoulders sagged, confusion giving way to something closer to shame. For the first time, I saw the strings that had kept him elevated, and I watched him realize they had been pulled by the same hands that had tied me down. The room felt different then, as if the script had slipped from their control, and Nathan was left staring at the pages, unsure whether to keep reading or to finally set them aside. After the confrontation, the house seemed to close in on me, every polished surface reflecting back a version of myself I no longer recognized. I returned to the guest room and began to pack. The movements were efficient, practiced, like preparing for a business trip, though this time I knew I would not be coming back. On my laptop, I canceled every authorization connected to the family accounts. The automatic transfers stopped with a few clicks, and I sent notices to my bank that no future payments should be processed. Next came the harder work placing freezes on my credit reports, locking down the identity my father had used so freely. My firm's legal department responded within the hour to my encrypted message, confirming they would pursue the fraudulent guarantees tied to my name. With each step, the ties loosened, until all that remained were the shadows of them. My suitcase stood ready by the door before dawn. I had already changed my flight to Boston, where a new senior role waited. It was more than a promotion. It was a chance to start over in a city where no one knew me as Richard and Sylvia's daughter, where my work would stand without comparison. Before I left, I reached into my bag for the one item I had carried quietly all these years, the brass key to Helen's Craftsman house. It no longer opened any lock, but it had always reminded me of safety. I stopped at a small shop near the airport and asked them to engrave a single word across its worn surface boundaries. When I boarded the plane, the key rested in my palm, warm from my grip. A final inheritance, not of money, but of meaning. As the wheels lifted from Portland's runway, I understood that my life was no longer collateral for anyone else's debts. Months passed before the first message arrived. Sylvia's email dripped with sentiment, weaving childhood memories into pleas for understanding. She reminded me of holidays past, of meals prepared and sacrifices supposedly made, though each line carried the unmistakable weight of guilt. I read it twice, then answered with 3 sentences acknowledgement of receipt, clarification that I was well, and a reminder that future correspondence should be limited to matters requiring documentation. Richard reached out soon after, though his tone was strictly professional. He introduced me as a trusted consultant in letters to his business partners, as though attaching my name might salvage the credibility he had lost. I redirected each inquiry to my firm's general line, ensuring he received nothing more than the same automated courtesy extended to any other client. The distance was firm, and I held it. Nathan's call came later. Hesitant at first. He didn't dress his words in excuses. Instead, he admitted what I had long suspected, that he had leaned on their support without asking where it came from, that he had accepted the advantages as natural. I thought I needed them, he said quietly, but I think I just didn't know how to stand without the scaffolding. His voice carried no demand, only recognition. For the first time, I believed he might learn to carry his own weight. In Boston, I built something Helen would have recognized. I established a scholarship in her name, dedicated to teaching young women in Oregon the very lessons she once laid across her kitchen table. Applications filled my inbox, students eager to understand budgeting, credit, independence. Each story reminded me that her legacy had never been the money, but the knowledge she gave freely. The past still pressed against me at times, but it no longer dictated my balance sheet. I was investing in futures that saw worth where mine once had been denied, and preparing for the day I would finally hang Helen's key on my own wall. My apartment in Boston overlooked the Charles River, the water shifting gold under the late afternoon sun. On the wall above my desk hung a simple frame, and inside it the brass key Helen once pressed into my palm. The engraving glinted faintly in the light boundaries. It had become more than a relic. It was a compass, a reminder that the locks I chose mattered more than the doors closed to me. When Michael and I married, the ceremony was small, held in a hall lined with windows that opened onto the harbor. Friends stood with us. Colleagues who knew me not as someone's daughter, but as someone whose work mattered. Nathan came alone, his suit ill-fitting, his expression subdued. He offered a quiet congratulations and no defense of the people who stayed away. That silence was its own kind of reckoning. The absence of Richard and Sylvia did not hollow the day. Instead, it confirmed what I had come to understand. Family is not defined by bloodlines or shared tables, but by those who invest in your worth without demanding repayment. My grandmother had known that truth long before I did. She planted it in me, and I carried it here, to this city, to this life I built without their scaffolding. In the evenings, I sometimes sit beneath the frame and let my eyes rest on the key. It no longer opens Helen's Craftsman house, but it unlocks something far greater. It speaks of freedom earned, of dignity reclaimed, of love chosen rather than owed. And as I look out over the river, I know that the future waiting beyond my door is one I will open on my own terms.